this. The recording will be sent via replay, as well as if I mention any additional things such as we have a list of warehouses and fulfillment centers that we sometimes send out. We also have additional have inventory planners, that type of thing. So I can send those out at the end to anybody who stays along for the call. But let's go ahead and get started. This is inventory planning to win 2021. All right, so we're essentially going to be talking about what things you should have in place to be able to get really good at inventory management for 2021. What are the pitfalls of inventory management, and what are the things to have in place, the best practices for inventory management? So a little bit about myself. So I am Chelsea Cohen. I am an Amazon seller myself. I'm a speaker and consultant. I am also a copywriting expert. So I've worked with a lot of 7- and 8-figure sellers. I've seen some of the marketing side of the Amazon space in terms of marketing into stock out. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about, how to properly scale. Inventory management has a lot to do with scaling. I saw with my own business that I needed to get inventory management down a lot better if I was really going to help to expand. And I also see that as something that Amazon sellers in general need to get better at is, they're really good at marketing, but when marketing causes you to stock out, it really hurts your ability to scale. So that's a little bit about me. I've been selling since 2014 and really started to tackle this issue in 2018. So it's been 2 years now. It's actually been a little over 2 years since I started looking into how to get inventory management to be a more established part of my business. So my general struggle, I have a lot of different things that went on with inventory management. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar to you. Stocking out, right? Losing inventory getting stranded or lost at Amazon until after Christmas. That was something that happened early on in my business. Amazon likes to say things are lost when you check things in late. They like to say things are lost, and then they miraculously find it later on, and after the point at which it really truly matters to you sometimes. And then, losing out on months of time worth of inventory. So top sellers stocking out for a month here, 3 weeks there, really frustrating, just not planning properly. And part of the not planning properly is the amount of time that it was taking me to actually do the work of calculating the inventory needs. And so that taking a lot of time happened to make me procrastinate, and then it was too late. Things like over ordering also were occurring. Over ordering, using bad data, looking at last year's sales and not really analyzing the data properly, and overestimating certain things, underestimating certain things. We'll talk about why that is, but let me know if any of this sounds familiar to you. Is any of this stuff that you guys have experienced? You're obviously on an inventory management call, so hopefully, there's some things that you can learn as we go along. That's generally why I got into inventory management. I really needed a solution. My cash flow was really suffering, which meant my marketing was suffering, my expansion was suffering, because I didn't have a solution to this problem, right? So I was looking at a bunch of different options, but none of them actually really worked. So I knew I had to build something myself. About 2 weeks after I decided to build something, I met this guy, Dan Fernandez. We were both speaking at an event, and he was saying that he was bored. He needed a new software project. I had known his previous software and knew his background, and we had hit it off, and I told him about the problem that I had with inventory management, and that many people in my masterminds had basically tried a bunch of the tools out there and said that none of them really worked for them. They didn't work, and they were going back to their spreadsheets. So I knew that there was something that could be done. If someone could do inventory management on a spreadsheet, albeit time consuming and sometimes sloppy and prone to errors, if someone could do it on a spreadsheet, why couldn't we do it in a software? So that's kind of where this whole journey started. That was in 2018 when we first started this adventure called So Stocked. So we've spent the last 2+ years basically eating, sleeping, and breathing inventory management. I've talked to hundreds, it says dozens there, but by now we've talked to hundreds, literally hundreds of Amazon sellers, 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers. We've seen Amazon sellers' spreadsheets, really smart people. We've seen their spreadsheets. We've tried the different management softwares out there. We've talked to people about the pitfalls of different management softwares, the troubles that people have had in not being able to conform to the other softwares that they have tried, or the problems with their own systems, and have come up with smart ways to solve them. So I've done a lot of work around inventory management, and I also hear a lot about the different things that people are seeing with the inventory and restocking algorithms, and have been able to identify how Amazon, to some degree, how Amazon looks at inventory restocking, and that has been fairly valuable to us, really, especially in the past couple of months. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the common inventory management mistakes, and everything I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to show you how we look at it and how we handle it inside of So Stocked. And I noticed some of you guys on here are So Stocked users, and then some of you may not be. If you are not, that's fine. Some of these things can carry over into spreadsheets, and we do have a very kind of an intro spreadsheet that we have made up. So if you're interested in getting that, you can get that as well on our So Stocked blog. But it's really recommended for people who have, a couple of SKUs and are just kind of getting started. But it does take a lot of the techniques that we're going to talk about and helps to put it into practice. So common inventory mistakes. There's, basically 3 general inventory mistakes. So we're going to talk quickly about those. The first one would be under ordering, right? Under ordering can really occur when your data is off, right? If you had a stock out, for example, and you didn't account for the stock out, and you just placed the same type of an order that had caused you to stock out previously, that could cause you to stock out again. So under ordering tends to be one of those problems. An example would be last Christmas. So for last Christmas, perhaps you sold 6,000 units. And then you looked at last Christmas, you took the dates, you said, I want from Black Friday to the end of the Christmas period. How much did I sell, right? And you took that 6,000 units that you sold, but you didn't analyze the data to really pay attention to the fact that, oh yeah, you stocked out on that SKU, right? Maybe if you had one SKU, maybe you could remember it. But if you have, say you've got a dozen SKUs, if you're not analyzing that data, you could miss something like that, where you stocked out for a week and you lost 1,200 units worth of sales. So you should have placed an order for 7,200 units, but instead, this next Christmas order, you place the same order of 6,000 units. You needed 7,200, and then you again stocked out for another week, and you lost another 1,200 units worth of sales. So it's essentially the whole making the same mistake twice issue that you get into when you're not analyzing the data properly. So I'm going to talk a little bit, in a few slides from now, I'm going to talk about how to analyze the data properly and what you should be looking for so that you don't make that same mistake. The next general mistake is over ordering, right? Over ordering can come for a couple of different reasons, right? Sometimes people get too overzealous, they get too eager, they get enticed by a supplier to place a big order. But that can sometimes be a problem. And other times it's just, again, bad data, right? It's very similar to stocking out. If you take just the pure sales data without knowing what happened within that time period, unusual sales spikes could be in that data, sales spikes that are not going to occur next time, and that could then lead you to over order the next time around, the next season. So an example would be last fall, you sold 10,000 units. You didn't really realize that you forgot that part of that was you were featured in some media or some influencer featured you, or there was some huge spike in sales, and essentially your sales without that media would have been 7,000. So this next order should be 7,000, but you end up ordering 10,000 and you have 3,000 units in excess inventory. Again, making the same mistake twice, right? So again, this is why unevaluated data is dangerous, can be dangerous. Either you're paying high storage fees, you're tying up capital, or you're losing out on inventory and you're having to airship inventory to cover the stockouts that you are trying to avoid, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, what should we look for to avoid these two things, because it's basically two sides to the same coin. But the third problem that we will discuss is cutting it too close. It's simply not ordering on time, right? You might have the numbers correct, but you might, again, be procrastinating because it takes so long. You're basically starting from scratch. You're downloading the report, you're analyzing the data, and you are, sorry, my dog is freaking out. Essentially, you are, you're running out of stock because you're waiting too long, or you don't have the other thing could be your lead times. You think your lead times are 30 days, but now they're 40 days or they're 45 days. All right, so let's talk about inventory best practices. How do we avoid all of these things? What does it look like to actually put systems in place to avoid over ordering, under ordering, and ordering too late? What does that actually look like? What are all of those pieces, right? There are several different pieces, and it could seem very overwhelming, but if you decide that you're going to gradually adopt each individual system and you look at them as individual systems, it will become a lot more understandable and a lot more confrontable, right? It's one of those how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. All right, so the first thing to do is adjusted velocity. This is something that will help you with both over ordering and under ordering. This is using monthly sales, using adjusted daily velocity versus monthly sales totals. So essentially you just need a system to remove anomalies such as sales spikes and stockouts that you don't plan on repeating, right? And I emphasize don't plan on repeating because there are some people who use lightning deals as a regular monthly or weekly occurrence. If you're using those lightning deals as a regular occurrence, those wouldn't be things that you would remove. If you're going to repeat them, don't remove them. If you don't think they're going to occur again, those are the things that you want to remove, and you want to take a better average. So if, for example, you're in stock for 20 days out of 30, you want a 20-day average for that time period versus a 30-day average. So what that would look like is this. If we jump on over to So Stocked, we can look at our forecast, right? And this is the adjusted velocity. So you have the ability to, essentially you're pulling data, right? You want to pull your sales data from Amazon, and you want to decide what your average is, right? Maybe you like looking at a 30-day average, or maybe 30 and 60-day average. Once you've assessed what type of an average you're looking at, the next thing that you need to do is to make sure that you're removing some of these anomalies. So sales spikes would be one of those. You can see that there are some of these time periods that are considered sales spikes. So that's something that you may not want to include in your next data set. A good rule of thumb to look at sales spikes is to consider anything that is 150% of your average sales for the period or more. So that's what we do in So Stocked, and with the inventory spreadsheet that I can send out to you if you are just starting out or you only have a few SKUs that you are analyzing, we do have this calculation put into that spreadsheet. It is time consuming, and it is something that you would have to keep track of yourself. but that is a good rule of thumb. Anything that's 150% of your average sales for the period could be considered a sales spike. So removing sales spikes would be important. That would help you to avoid over ordering. Deep discounts would be the same thing. We don't get a lot of deep discounts nowadays, but some people do still use coupons. You might consider removing coupon discount sales. And then stockouts. The thing to consider with stockouts is that zero should not be the only factor for stockouts. Zero inventory should not be the only factor. It's one of the most important factors, because if you have zero inventory, you literally can't make sales unless you're doing FBM, right? So if you have zero inventory, you would consider that a stockout, but you also need to look at stockout patterns. And that's where a lot of people kind of get it wrong. If you're not looking at a stockout pattern, you could miss certain days where you're used to selling 100 units and you sell 10 units. There's something wrong with that. That's going to mess up your 30-day average, right? Sometimes Amazon, you do stock out and Amazon finds an extra unit and they sell an extra unit when you're used to selling 400 units a day. That is going to mess up your calculations. So removing those things, a general rule of thumb that we use is looking at anything that is 30% or less of your average daily sales and tagging those as potential stockouts. So what that's going to do is that's going to remove stockouts, but it's also going to remove those periods of time where you were stocked out, but you did maybe sell a couple of units. Maybe you just, right before you stocked out, you sold a couple of units and then you stocked out completely. And then right as you were coming back in stock, you sold a couple of units toward the end of the day as your inventory was being checked in. Another thing that it can catch is the inventory, listing suspensions. So listing suspensions, you can have a ton of inventory. Maybe you have thousands of units sitting at FBA, but if your system is not catching that your listing is suspended, or if your system is considering that because you have inventory, that means you're in stock and it should count as a normal sales day, that becomes a problem. So that's what this system catches, is looking at sales patterns and not just inventory means that we're able to really get a true idea of what your average daily velocity is. So, and feel free to type in any questions that might be pertinent to what we're talking about. I can answer them as we go. Sometimes it can seem like drinking through a fire hose, but that's the general gist of figuring out the daily average velocity, right? Not using your whole total amount of sales, but using an adjusted daily velocity, removing all of those sales spikes, removing those stockouts, and making sure that you have a good daily number to use when calculating. All right, so adjusted daily velocity, just as a recap, right? We're using averages. We're not using a monthly sales total. There is a potential to use last year's sales, right? We didn't discuss that, but there is the potential to use last year's sales. So if you're trying to figure out what to do for Christmas, right, you can use last year's sales and you can pull the actual sales data for that time period and then remove the sales spikes, the stockouts, and all of that. So you could potentially use last year's sales data, and then you remove stockouts, sales spikes, deep discounts, and you could potentially add a growth trend. So if you are using your last year's sales data, but you know that you had an increase in sales, you looked at year to date, your increase in that particular product was, 30%, 50%, you could add that on top as a layer. You say, I want the sales pattern, but I want the growth of how much my sales have increased from last year to this year. I want that to be added to the calculation. So it's just layering those different elements. All right, and I see I have a question. All right, let's see what this question is how to sow stock to account for the inventory in our local warehouse, not Amazon warehouse. Yes, so I can definitely get to that. Oh, Stephen, hi. Nice to see you. So yeah, so let's do, just to answer that really quickly, we are calculating warehouse inventory as well. So I'll get into, we call it simultaneous forecasting, and I'll get into what exactly that is. So I'll keep this question open because I am getting to that. I have a slide for that. And that is something that other systems don't necessarily do, and then what Amazon doesn't necessarily do. Amazon makes these recommendations, but they don't necessarily always have accurate lead times, and they don't have your warehouse inventory. So they're going to tell you that you need to place an order based on a lead time, but you may transfer. So you really need to know what your transfers are and what your orders are. It's two separate things. We'll talk about that. Forecasting adjusted is adjusted based on your true velocities. So that's really what you want to focus on. The first thing to focus on, and the first system to get down, is to really change the way that you think about calculating your reorders or your order needs or your transfer needs, right? Calculating based on your adjusted daily velocity, not based on total sales for a previous period, right? Because also total sales for a previous period can get you into a pattern of just placing the same order over and over again, and then you never grow and you never expand, right? Because you don't have the extra income inventory that you may need to be able to make those marketing decisions. All right, the next piece to adopt, so after you have really wrapped your head around the adjusted daily velocity, the next thing to adopt would be a buffer stock, right? It's also known as a safety stock. So this is something that is like a false zero. It's something that triggers you to order so that your inventory arrives before you hit a stock out. So it's kind of like when you're driving a car and you have the empty light come on and it says, empty, you're running out of gas. You're not really empty. You have enough to get to the gas station. The buffer stock is the extra cushion so that if anything goes wrong, you can still get to the gas station. You can still avoid that stock out, right? So I'm going to talk about it's all good and fine to say have a buffer stock, but there are certain things that you have to know in order to adopt a good buffer stock. So here are some buffer stock guidelines. The longer the lead time that you have, or the longer the transfer time, right? And when I talk about lead time, I'm talking about the time from the point that you place your order with your supplier to the time that it arrives either at your third-party warehouse or at FBA. And the transfer time would be, you've got inventory sitting at a third-party warehouse. How long does it take to get into Amazon, right? So the longer the lead time or the longer the transfer time, the higher the buffer you should have. Really consider the longer time it takes and the more steps along the way, the more things can go wrong. So the more things that can go wrong, the more safety you should have, the more protection you should have. So you should have additional inventory to make up for those potential risks. Also, setting your buffer stock in days is better than setting it in units. And I'll show you that. So if you're going to be setting up your buffer stock, there are a couple of ways to consider it. If you do have your daily velocity calculation, this is where this can work out, right? A lot of times people are not using adjusted daily velocity, so they don't really know what their daily number is, so they can't calculate their buffer stock in days. So if you have a buffer stock and you're setting it to days, those days can be, you can set it to say 30 days, and then based on how your sales fluctuate, whether they increase or they decrease, the amount of units that you actually need are going to change. So if you have a high sales season, if you sell, swimsuits, and your summer season is very, a lot of sales, 30 days of stock for summer is going to be a lot higher than 30 days of stock for fall or winter for a swimsuit product, for example. So really having your buffer stock set in days using your daily adjusted velocity helps you to, throughout the seasons, moderate how much inventory you actually need without really having to go in and change it every time. It's going to be flexible based on your velocity. All right. And so what that is going to do when you have your buffer stock, it's going to tell you to transfer. If it takes you 15 days to transfer and you want 30 days of buffer stock, it's going to tell you to transfer 45 days before you run out of stock, because it's looking at 30 days of buffer stock, 15 days of transfer. So it's going to do that calculation for you. So you get into the point where you're prepared. You're not running out of stock and you're not running out of time, because you're giving yourself enough time, because you're adding your transfer time or your lead time as well as your buffer stock. And another good thing would be to consider having a buffer stock for your FBA inventory and a buffer stock for your warehouse inventory, right? So you could have 30 days of buffer stock at FBA and then maybe an extra 15 at your warehouse, especially in products where you are running out of stock very often, right? If you have your best sellers and you're consistently running out of stock for some reason, it might be a good idea to do a report to look at what are those items that are especially at risk. So for example, if you were to be able to run a report on any stockouts that you might have had in the past, you should be able to look at stockouts. So we look at future stockouts. We have items that have potential to stock out, and then we can also see in the past year what percentage of the time were they actually stocked out. So you can see which products were at risk of stocking, or more at risk of stocking out, and how valuable is that to you. Another thing, so okay, maybe you have a bigger buffer stock for those particular products that tend to run out of stock, and maybe you need to even look at your lead time, and maybe the lead time isn't what you think it is, because your supplier told you 3 years ago it was 30 days, but then they got a bunch of other customers and they became very, very busy as more and more people came to selling on Amazon. The lead time stretched out to 40, 45 days, and yet you never adjusted your system. So buffer stocks. Okay, so the last thing to factor in for considering a good buffer stock is something that not a lot of people are talking about, but this is something that has tended to come up, and we've talked to sellers who have actually seen this work out against them when they don't have enough inventory. So that is we always have our 2-day prime, right? Some sellers have 1-day prime, and some sellers even have a 1-day prime badge for some listings. Well, when they don't have enough stock spread throughout the entire country, those badges tend to go away. So the 1-day prime badge is lost, especially in things like grocery category. Those become problems. So if you could lose your 1-day prime badge. The other thing that could be happening in the background is your ads for specific areas in terms of geolocation. If someone is in a certain area where you don't have a lot of inventory because you have, say, maybe 10 days worth of inventory throughout the entire country, maybe in the Midwest, someone is looking for your product and you're bidding the same as your competitor, and your competitor has a ton of inventory sitting in the Midwest and you don't have very much inventory in the Midwest. It's a lot more likely that on that ad that you are both competing for, that your competitor is going to get that ad, that from Amazon's algorithm is going to say, let's give the competitor that ad click and not give it to you because you don't have enough inventory, and we need to make sure that we can hit that 2-day prime shipping. And we're not sure if we can do that with his product. So that's something to consider, making sure you have enough inventory throughout the entire country. A good rule of thumb that we have seen throughout the community has been 30 days. Not very many people, seem to like to go below 30 days. 30 days seems to give you a good spread. The other thing it could affect geo ranking as well. And those are things that are very hard for you to be able to isolate. Since you're in your one state, you don't see where exactly where you're ranking in other states. And so there's an idea that there's geo ranking that's being tested throughout the platform that could have these, minor effects on your inventory and on your sales. So keeping your inventory in stock and at a good level tends to be a good practice and a good rule of thumb. So again, to reiterate, the higher the possibility of delays, the larger the buffer stock should be, right? Within reason, of course, we do now have restrictions and limitations, which make it a little bit more difficult, but that's hopefully starting to come back up. We are seeing a little bit of inventory restocking creeping back up. It's not where we hope it will be, and I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was before, but it is getting to be a little bit better. All right, the next thing to consider would be min-max restocking. So this is very much in line with having a buffer stock. The difference is just that you're adding a maximum. So the minimum would be your buffer stock. The maximum would be the highest amount of inventory you want to send to Amazon. It makes it extremely easy for you to be able to kind of pass things off to your VAs because you're giving them some rules or some guidelines, right? So what that would look like would be if you were to go into your product and you would have a minimum, right? Your buffer stock, 30 days, and then a maximum. So maybe you had 90 days. Now that's not always going to be something that you'll be able to use. Sometimes you have an IPI limit, but let's say you're, have 90 days, or maybe you have 60 days. The amount of inventory you'll be sending in will always be 60 days. And you will always send inventory in so that you top off at 60 days, you sell through, and then you transfer so that by the time you hit 30 days, your inventory is then arriving, your next shipment is arriving, you go back up to 60, down to 30, back up to 60. So you're always staying within that range. It helps you to modulate. It's actually something that I did a tour of a warehouse and a factory. It was a printing factory. And so they had huge spools of paper, huge vats of ink, and they used a min-max restocking system. And that's where I actually learned about this, was they had specific levels. So when, they had them on weighted scales, when it got down to a certain amount, they would place a reorder up to the top, and then they would sell through, and then they would place a reorder. And that's how they ran their min-max restocking. So you can do that for your FBA, and you can do that for your warehouse, have minimums and maximums. All right, so the benefits of min-max restocking would be optimizing your inventory levels, reducing stockouts, reducing your high FBA storage fees, and then also just systemizing your reordering and your transferring so that you can more easily delegate the tasks to VAs. So a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, we tend to have everything in our head. We don't think we can pass things on because we have to do it by gut feel, and inventory seems to be something that a lot of people are operating off of gut feel on. And so once you put this in place, you can then pass these tasks over to your VAs, and your VAs will know what to look for. And they'll say, here's, you're supposed to place an order because you're 15 days away from running out of stock, and you have to place this much because that's the amount that will get you to your maximum. And it becomes very easy for a VA to tell you what is needed. And then you just take a look and you say, yep, let's do it. And you place your order. All right, the next would be the inventory timeline. This is something that I feel like it is a game changer. It's that ninja hack that I really like that makes inventory a lot more clear and a lot more sane, right? It's not a bunch of numbers floating around. And, some of us are numbers people, some of us are not numbers people. So when you have, when you don't have everything laid out visually, it can get a little bit overwhelming and confusing. right? So an inventory timeline, and this is something we have in SoStock. It's also something that you can build out on a spreadsheet, right? But it's extremely valuable. So this is what it looks like. It's a running daily total of what your inventory would be at Amazon and what your daily velocity is. So it's deducting inventory every single day based on your daily velocity. It's listing out your warehouse inventory. You can then know when to transfer, know when to order, know when items are going to arrive, know when you're going to stock out. If you're going to stock out, maybe, you can see, okay, there's going to be a stock out for a couple of days. So if there's going to be a stock out for a couple of days, maybe I simply need to slow down those sales. Maybe I just stop, kind of turn down some of my ads for a couple of days. You don't want to slow it down too much, but if you can, for just a handful of days, that might be a way to go. Especially if you've, maybe just turn off your coupons for a couple of weeks until you're restocked. So it really lays things out. You can see everything that's going on, and it just gives you a clear picture of your inventory, right? So this is something that's very helpful to people. It also can include things such as, planning seasonal spikes, planning email campaigns. You can plug in these additional events, these marketing events, and really visualize what's going to happen throughout the year to your inventory. So benefits of the timeline would be you're able to track your inventory changes over time. You're able to visualize patterns, foresee stockouts, know when you need to place an order or a transfer. It also gives you a running daily inventory count, and it shows you when inventory is going to be arriving, right? So if you place a PO and it's 90 days out, you can actually go in and see, what's the date that it's actually going to arrive, right? So we have all that kind of laid out here in our timeline. You're able to see inventory, forecast, estimated arrival dates, and then you can come into, say, January 19th, you'll be able to actually find that express order arriving. Okay, simultaneous forecasting. So this is what kind of brings us to the question that was asked about inventory, right? Local warehouse inventory versus Amazon inventory. So we do what's called simultaneous forecasting. You need to be able to forecast for your orders and also for your warehouse transfers at the same time. So if you have a 3PL, you really need to be able to have two forecasts going at the same time, and maybe even a third if you do have an express shipment that's needed for an emergency, right? So you can see here we've got a regular order and we have an express order. So those are two different simultaneous forecasts, 50-day and a 20-day for those forecasts. And we also have this transfer right here, which is occurring. So you have orders and you have transfers. That's what we call simultaneous forecasting. So when you do have a third-party warehouse, you do need to be doing these forecasting, these simultaneous forecasts, to be able to track everything. And that's why the inventory timeline, is a little bit more robust. It has several different sections: a warehouse inventory and your FBA inventory, and then all of your orders and your transfers. So hopefully that answers the question for Stephen. All right, so simultaneous forecasting. All right, forecast modeling. So then we like to call what we're doing forecast modeling. Forecast modeling is essentially, it's a little bit different. Let's see. I think we have another question. Okay, so forecast modeling, I'll answer that question in a second. Forecast modeling it's essentially you're taking past sales data, but you're also incorporating future marketing plans. You're seeing what would happen if I did this, what would happen if I did that, right? It's testing things out, moving things around, kind of playing with things so that you can actually see how they affect the timeline and how they affect your inventory levels. So we get into what I like to call sync to scale. We are very much marketing minded as a community. We're very focused on marketing. There's a lot of talk about marketing. This marketing trick, getting, better ACoS in your PPC, increasing your conversions. All of that we love to talk about. We love to dive into. And then there are the boring subjects like inventory management and cash flow management. But that actually creates a circle. It's all of these things need to be sunk up or you're going to fail, right? It's, sync to scale or sink or fail. So we need to actually get marketing into our inventory planning and into our cash flow. We actually have a kind of like a little cheat sheet showing the pattern in which marketing needs to take, a list of all of the things that they're considering doing, giving that data over to inventory. Inventory needs to give it to cash flow, and then cash flow needs to give it back to marketing. And any tweaks along the way need to be done if the marketing is too aggressive for the inventory levels, if the inventory purchases are too high for the cash flow, and so on. So marketing, right? I like to say a good marketing plan can turn bad fast when it's so successful that it causes a stock out. I've talked to a lot of people, PPC agencies who have stocked out their clients. I've talked to people who've had to cancel lightning deals. I have had clients who have done email campaigns with coupons, and then the next month they were canceling everything because they were stocking out. So it's this short-sightedness and doing your marketing and not really vetting your inventory against your marketing. So you need to take your marketing plans and plug them into your inventory plans and see if your inventory will actually be able to afford that marketing. Right? It's often, inventory and cash flow are afterthoughts, and it becomes an emergency and a scramble, and it ends up costing you more money than it would actually make you, because you're stocking out, you're having to re-rank, you're having to airship, and it really starts eating into your profit. And you also could have sold those inventories at full price versus the discounts, the coupon discounts, or versus the ad spend that you spent to move those products more aggressively. So we talked about successful ad campaigns that stock you out, discount coupon email campaigns that stock you out, listing optimization that doubles your conversion, right? So if you're doing listing optimization, and you should see some immediate change, and take a look at what that change is. If you find that it increases by 5%, plug 5% into your calculation and see if you need to place an order sooner, right? Vet your inventory before implementing these marketing strategies to prevent from stocking out. So that's something that you can start recording, right? And we built the tool to really start adding these things into the system, right? If you wanted to do, your PPC campaign and you wanted to increase your sales by 10%, right? You can see that that's actually going to stock you out. So maybe you shouldn't do it so aggressively. Maybe you can start it later, right? You can also, you can put lightning deals in there. So your lightning deal will then show up in your calculation. So here, I believe this was the lightning deal, and this lightning deal is going to stock us out as well. So we start looking at, okay, well, there's certain things that we can't actually do. We have to kind of change our strategy because we're going to run out of stock. And so you actually end up keeping a lot more money because you're more smart about how you're doing your marketing, right? You've got your sales spikes, you've got your lightning deals, and these same tools can be used for email marketing, for working with influencers. All of these things can be calculated out, and this can go out for an entire year. You can start planning these things out. You should do it at least three to 6 months out. Start planning these things. Mother's Day, Father's Day, things that you on a whim decide to do. Well, maybe if you planned them out, you could actually be more proactive in your marketing instead of being more reactive in your inventory. Because that's kind of what's happening is you're proactive in your marketing, but reactive in your inventory. And you really need to be proactive in both of those elements, and then also in cash flow. All right. So inventory. So inventory, again, has to be factored. I like to say that in an inventory-based business, when you're out of inventory, you're out of business. So it's really got to be a lot more important to your overall strategy to vet inventory, to see that you have enough, right? That you increase your orders. If you're planning on scaling up your marketing, you increase your orders accordingly, right? And that you, before you start your marketing, you see that you have enough inventory. It's a huge missing piece. And I do talk to inventory teams, so VA teams of inventory managers. And I actually get, a kind of a nervous laughter when I talk about, wouldn't it be great if marketing would tell you what they were doing, because that's very common for them not to tell the inventory team what they're doing. And the inventory team is just constantly reacting to these aggressive changes. So accuracy in inventory is also important. So beyond everything that we talked about, having an accurate inventory count, right? Being able to have the right inventory count is important. So there's a lot of different elements that go into counting your inventory, your total inventory on hand, right? So an accurate inventory count means available inventory, your reserve minus customer orders. And some systems get that wrong. They don't include reserved, or they include reserves and they add customer orders to that as if customer orders are available for sale. They're not. Very rarely they will be if someone cancels their order. You need inbound to Amazon. So all of your FBA shipments that are going into Amazon, you need your warehouse inventory, you need your inbound to your warehouse, and you need your items that are in production, right? So items in production. So you need to be able to have an overall view, and you need to be able to have it in a couple of different ways. So we have, let's see. We have inventory on hand. So you see total FBA stock, you see warehouse stock, inbound to warehouse, total stock. You have to have the data accessible, and then you can see anything that's inbound and anything that's inbound to the warehouse. And then we have another view you can use. It's kind of like a Trello board, a Kanban view. You can see anything that's in production, anything that's en route, anything that's arriving at your prep center. And you need to have a full inventory count. So all of this data needs to go into your inventory. If you were to set up SoStock, for example, and you didn't have your warehouse inventory, it's going to tell you to order, and maybe you don't need to order. So you need to have all these numbers in place. Whoops. Okay, cash flow. So cash flow, your ability to scale is directly proportionate to the intelligent utilization of capital. So if you do not use your cash flow properly, if you are tying up inventory in products that are not moving, if you don't have enough inventory to reorder, then it makes scaling very difficult. So you have to have a symbiotic, not a parasitic relationship. All three of those teams need to work together. If you have one team that tends to cause problems for the other teams, that becomes a parasitic relationship, right? And marketing can sometimes have a parasitic relationship to the others because it's making decisions that actually hurt the other teams. So when all the teams are working together, making decisions that are based on keeping inventory in stock, selling inventory for a good profit, making those decisions not based on creating stockouts, then all the teams thrive and your business does well. And so that's the best way to really handle your business, is to create a symbiotic relationship between those three teams. So again, marketing, inventory, and cash flow, and it creates kind of a flywheel. All right. The thing that you do want to avoid is you've got the seller stock out cycle, right? So Amazon has been taking weeks to check in inventory. Then your product stocks out because Amazon is checking it in, right? And Amazon is looking at your 30-day sales, right? and your sales get lowered, and therefore the restock limit decreases because your sales have decreased, right? And we do have a question here from Kevin. Says, since Amazon is going to remove their limits, do you think it's important to have a 3PL in the States? They're not removing their limits fully, actually. They're removing their storage limits, but they have said they're keeping restock limits in place. Hopefully they'll be increasing it, but they are keeping that in place. It's always good to have a backup plan. I don't, like right now, I checked some of my products. Products went down to about 5 weeks worth of inventory, about mid-December, beginning to middle of December. They're starting to creep back up. I saw some of my products 65, 67 days worth of inventory. So the amount of inventory allowed is starting to increase, but we don't know if they're going to increase fully. And we really don't want to rely on Amazon for everything. We've seen how their policy changes can really upset our business. So I want to make sure I'm sharing the right one. Staying in stock is vitally important, and keeping your sales going. So staying in stock doesn't necessarily only mean staying in stock at Amazon FBA. It simply means letting Amazon know that you're still in business, right? So what should you do? So you should have a backup plan, right? It doesn't mean you need to keep a lot of inventory at the warehouse. And I do have a webinar that I did about warehouses, but the whole point is that you shouldn't let Amazon be your only just distribution channel, right? You should always have a backup plan, someone who can accept inventory for you, just in case Amazon decides to change their policies. They may change it in your favor, and then they may change it back. So having a backup plan, not only for someone who can send replenishment inventory into FBA, but also for someone who could, if you needed to flip a switch, could fulfill for you. Because if you sent a bunch of inventory into Amazon and then it got lost, you're basically out of business. You have inventory, but Amazon has not checked it in, and they basically have a stranglehold on your business. So you want to have a backup plan. You want to have another distribution channel. So set up a warehousing and transfer system. And at the end of this, when I send the replay out, I can send you guys a link to the some of the community sourced resources. So warehouses, fulfillment centers, even I think there's a couple of other, like an inspection company in there. We're constantly updating these resources, and they are community sourced people who, sellers who have recommended those particular resources. So create a backup distribution channel. FBM sales are actually, the good news is that FBM sales will keep your restock levels from plummeting. So even if you stock out at FBA, if you're still able to fulfill orders through FBM, even at a lower profit, that's going to keep your restock levels up, so that that 30 days worth of sales is not going to decrease your restock level and create a dwindling spiral of less and less ability to send in inventory, right? So having a backup fulfillment center just for the reason of keeping your restock levels up becomes very important. And I don't think we're out of hot water yet, even though Amazon is removing the storage. They're not removing the restock. They may be increasing it, but I don't think we're out of hot water. And I think we're out of the era of not having a backup plan, honestly. I really do. I think Amazon is pretty giddy with the fact that they just pulled off what they pulled off. As difficult as it was for all of us, they probably aren't sweating that much on it. So do have warehousing, at least have a resource that you can use, or you can, access or go to quickly, someone who's vetted and available for you to make that pivot if needed, right? Don't let Amazon get all of your inventory, right? We sent all of our inventory several years back to Amazon. They lost it, and we had no sales for Christmas. So that's, if we had sent only half of it, we could have sent the other half, sold FBM, and been, in a much better position for Christmas. So again, I'll send out the warehouse resources list. And if you're interested in learning how to pick a good warehouse, we have a warehousing webinar on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, type in So Stocked, you can find our channel. will help you pick a good one and learn what to ask, what fees, what you need to know about how to vet the business, make sure that it's, gonna stay long term. A lot of businesses are closing down because of all the craziness with COVID. And so it's really good to know what questions to ask. So that will really help you to make your decisions if you check that one out. All right. So sync inventory to scale. So with your systems in place, and again, you can get this replay and you can start slowly, adopt one technique and then the next one and the next one, and put these systems in place for 2021. So with these in place and with your marketing, inventory, and accounting teams all working together, you will be able to reduce your stockouts, increase your margins, and to scale rapidly, right? And increasing margins, one of the users of SoStock said they went from emergency express shipments that were costing them $1.20 per unit, and then using SoStock and having a system in place, their shipping costs went to between 45 to 55 cents per unit. So that's cutting that inventory, that shipping cost, in more than half. So it becomes a very good strategy, especially if you're really trying to streamline your profit. And if you're ever wanting to exit, increasing your margins means that when you sell your company, it will increase that payday significantly, because that's what is being looked for, is how much did you waste in profit that then the investor is going to be able to capitalize on. So you want to put that money in your pocket versus them putting it in their pocket. So really, short-term and long-term is a great way to increase the profit within your business. All right, Amazon inventory solutions. So if you are putting your system together, again, you want to remove sales spikes, remove stockouts, factor in your marketing, things like lightning deals and seasonality, tracking your orders and transfers. Also getting reorder alerts, right? So even if it's setting an alarm for yourself to check on a weekly basis, we have reorder alerts on SoStocked, but either way, you should have some sort of system to give yourself alerts. If you're using a spreadsheet, figure out a way to do that. And then manage FBA, third-party inventory, and on-order inventory. Let me know if you have any questions. For a limited time right now, we are actually going to be, we're offering for our $59 a month for life for SoStock. So if you haven't signed up for SoStock, you've been thinking about it, it would be a good time to sign up now. We are increasing our prices after January 1st. And we are going to be aggressively getting into wrapping up some more advanced features in inventory. We're going to be building out cash flow. And we are going to be getting into, towards the end of the year, logistics modeling. So being able to plug in all of the data, all of the warehousing fees, the warehousing fulfillment costs, shipping and handling, everything, and figuring out what are your costs, what are your true costs, and how can you increase your margins on all aspects of the logistics side of your business. So, and again, let me know if you have any questions. And that $59 a month for life means that if your sales go up, if your orders increase, if your SKUs increase, it doesn't matter. You will still lock in that price for all time. After the first, we will be changing the structure a little bit, and then even more so later on in the year. So let me see. I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, hopefully this was helpful to you. And again, I'll be sending the replay out so you can take it one step at a time. I know it does kind of sometimes seem overwhelming and like drinking from a fire hose, but that's why we've put the tools together for you to help you out with that. Don't have any open questions. Okay, good. All the questions have been answered. All right, and then if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me at stock@sostock.com. We do have our webinar series. We'll be running, these webinars for the next few weeks, and then I might, change and do something else based on interest. But we always have our webinars available at sostock.com/inventory-secrets. All right. I'm new to SoStock user and it's the best investment I've made. Awesome. I love hearing that. Yes. And we are working on it, making it even better. That's why we're raising our prices. We want to really we've put all of the money that we made, that we've brought in from SoStock directly back into the software. We've got more developers. And so we're getting into cash flow. We're going to get into logistics. We really want to be a logistics problem solver and start showing you different ways to increase your profit, really look at profit, increase your bottom line so that it's really a no-brainer. And especially at the $59 for life, we will get into a tiered structure where it will be based on the number of orders down the road. So locking the price in before that happens means, that it's a really great investment that, a lot of people will be jealous of later on down the road. So yeah. And if you have the software and you have any friends who are looking to get it or have been thinking about it, or if you wanted a secondary account, we do secondary accounts for 50% off. That 50% off will also be increasing. So if you had a secondary account that you wanted, you can get it right now for that 50% off. All right. Thank you guys so much. It's great to see you guys on the call. Recognize some nice faces. Some new, some old, and so it's great to see you guys. And since I probably won't be seeing you again until the new year, happy new year. Have a great new year. Have an awesome 2021. Set those goals and make them. And if there's anything that I can do to help you guys out with that, let me know. I'm happy to know you guys, and I love working with and helping entrepreneurs. So let's go ahead and crush 2021. All right, I'll see you guys later.